How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, forgive me a little bit. I'm a little under the weather, but I still have the energy to do the show. I would like to get this out, bring about more awareness to the Rebekah Baptiste case. If you guys are not familiar with this case, this is the first time I am doing a video on this case. So I'm going to give you all the details that I have. So this is a great video to introduce you to this case. I also have other videos that I would like to show you throughout the process. The reason why I decided to pick up this case was of a recent update that came out. It's an update in this case that happened about a little less than a year, sadly, after Rebekah Baptiste had passed. It's a unique update because it's an update that I believe is the center for a lot of the concerns we have with this case. But what I would like to do, since there may be a few people that aren't familiar with this case, I would like to first show you a little background on this case. So I have a video here, and then show you something that showcases the most recent update. So let me go ahead. Just bear with me, guys, because I'm trying to figure this out as it goes. I just want to make sure I got the right video. That's right here. Okay, so this will be the first video. So this will give you a bit of a background on this case. So here we go.
Following some breaking news in the investigation into the death of 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste. Good evening, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for 12 News at 6. I'm Karima Devine.
I'm Mark Curtis. We've just obtained body cam footage from the Holbrook Police Department. It shows the initial response to the 911 calls from Rebekah's father and girlfriend, saying the little girl was unresponsive.
The footage shows officials attempting life-saving measures on Rebekah as they begin to ask the adults questions about what happened. 12 News journalist Bianca Bono has watched those videos, and she's joining us now live up in the newsroom. And Bianca, what stands out to you?
Well, the videos were so difficult to watch. They show first responders take Rebekah into an ambulance, but they also show how it didn't take these police officers long to raise red flags about the story the suspects gave them. And we do want to warn you, you may find some of this footage disturbing.
She was involved in an accident?
No, she ran away. Holbrook police body camera footage showing the actions of officers who tried to save Rebekah Baptiste's life.
What happened, guys?
Ran away, and when they found her, this is how she was.
How long?
We don't know.
It's been at least 30 minutes.
It took us like 30 minutes just to get here. On July 27th, officers are seen meeting Richard Baptiste and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, at the intersection of Highway 177 and Highway 180. They had called 911 after Richard's daughter, Rebekah, was found unresponsive. One officer immediately starts chest compressions.
We got up about 9:30, so it would have been close to 10:30.
So you guys saw her the night before?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all sleep in the same building.
As Rebekah is put into an ambulance and rushed to the hospital, an officer starts asking Baptiste and Woods questions about what happened. They claim their service was bad at their home in Concho, which is why there was a delay in getting the 10-year-old help. They claimed Rebekah had run away that morning and a neighbor found her.
How'd they find her?
They were on quads.
They were on their quads, okay. And then they brought her to you?
Yeah.
At your house?
Yeah. Well, it's technically was my great uncle's. He died recently, so we moved in there.
The couple then alleges Rebekah has run away several times in the past month.
The first time she ran away, she told us that she didn't want to live here. She was just trying to leave.
Baptiste tells police he's working on getting full custody of his 3 children. As the officer learns, he has a history with Arizona's Department of Child Safety.
When was the last time you had contact with them?
The case was closed May
of this year?
May of last year.
Last year?
That's when we got our youngest back.
Without being asked, Woods then claims Rebekah has been making up stories about her and Baptiste.
DCS kept having new cases open because Rebekah would go to school
Okay.
and had all these different allegations. And what was becoming alarming to not only her therapist but to the DCS workers was that she started having markings. Like she had bruises on her hands and her arms, and they took pictures and thought Rebekah had told her that we had done it. Okay. And it was her way to try to get taken out.
So as you can see, the mother's already trying to, not the mother, sorry, because she's not the mother. I guess you could say the stepmother. And I say that title very loosely, but she's already trying to create the narrative
Time, another Holbrook officer tries speaking with Rebekah's siblings who are waiting in the car.
Hi, guys.
Each time he starts asking them questions, Baptiste or Woods appears in the window.
And then what happened?
And then she came back home.
Rebekah would ultimately be flown to Phoenix Children's Hospital and died from her injuries on July 30th.
Go to the
Before
Little
letting
Colorado
Baptiste
Medical
and
Center
Woods
if you want to look it
leave
up
for
on
the
your phone.
hospital, one officer informs the Apache County Sheriff's Office about the case, asking them to send investigators to the Baptiste home.
I just wanted to give you guys a heads up as to what is happening.
And Baptiste and Woods are now facing first-degree murder charges for Rebekah's death and child abuse charges related to her surviving siblings. DCS has said they are conducting a thorough review of this case. We're live in the newsroom.
Okay, so I do have two more videos I want to show you before we go into a little bit of the script I got here, because I'm going to really load you with a lot of information about this case. I did my research, and Russ Hamilton helped me out. Unfortunately, he couldn't make today's show for tonight. We were trying to do it earlier. It just, there were so many questions we had that we wind up saying, hold off, let's revisit it, because there was just so much that needed to be answered. So we deep dived again. He provided me some more information. I put it all together, and I'm giving it to you as is. And hopefully later on, I'm able to have Russ, because I would love for Russ to come on and give his perspective, because he provided some of the information here that I'll be reading off to you guys today. But I do got a couple of videos I want to show you, but there's two more before we start going into the script. So I want to give you a video right now that showcases the latest update. Let's see. This is the latest update. The video is about 2 to 3 days old. It's this one right here. For me, this video is probably the most concerning, and that's what made me want to do this case. Let me play it.
Rebekah ran away to a gas station trying to get help, and this was talked about during a court hearing while an Apache County investigator was on the stand.
RB had jumped out of a two-story window of an apartment complex. She had ran to at least one homeless person that she saw asking for help, and then ran to the QT. She had told the manager that she was being abused by her stepmother.
Rebekah went on to show responding officers bruising on her hands and feet, a bloody lip, and marks on her fingers. She claimed her parents hit her with brushes and belts and forced her to do rigorous exercise as discipline, and she said she did not feel safe at home. Well, police then went on to interview the parents. They claimed the girl was harming herself, and they denied abusing her, and ultimately police determined the case did not merit criminal prosecution because of conflicting accounts and a lack of witnesses. Well, fast forward a few months after that, prosecutors say the parents abused the girl to death in a manner consistent with torture, leaving her bruised from head to toe. Richard Baptiste and Anisha Woods are now charged with murder and child abuse. This month, DCS completed a months-long review of the issues raised by this high-profile case, and they're now preparing a final report. I'm Derek Stahl for Arizona's Family.
Derek.
Hello.
All right. So actually, before I do the other video, let's start there. Let's start what happened in October of 2024. That is the most recent update in the timeline. It's an update to the timeline. The young girl died actually July 30th of 2025. So this is about 7 months beforehand. So I want to take you back to October 17, 2024. It's a regular day in Phoenix, Arizona. We're inside a QT gas station. A clerk is going about their routine when a little girl runs through the door. She's 9 years old. She's out of breath. She's terrified. The little girl we're talking about is this beautiful little girl, Rebekah. There she is. Her name, again, is Rebekah Baptiste. She tells the clerk she needs help. She says her stepmother is hurting her. Think about that moment, a 9-year-old child desperate enough to run to strangers begging for help. The clerk does what any of us would hope someone would do. They call the police. When officers arrive, they see what Rebekah went through to get there. She didn't just walk out the front door. She jumped from a second-story window to escape. She has a bloody lip. Her hands are bruised. Her feet are bruised. And these aren't minor scrapes. These are visible injuries that police document right there on the scene. But here's what makes this moment so critical. Rebekah doesn't just show them injuries. She tells them exactly what's happening to her. She says, Anicia Woods, her father's girlfriend, the woman acting as her stepmother, is hurting her. She says she's being hit with a brush, hit with a belt, forced to do physical exercises as punishment, and then she says something that should have changed everything. I don't feel safe at home. What we didn't know then, what wouldn't be revealed until after her death, is that this wasn't the first time authorities had heard concerns about Rebekah. Wasn't even the fifth time. According to the official DCS Child Fatality Summary Report released after her death, this was the 10th report about abuse or neglect in this family. And that's since Rebekah was born. Counting documented reports from 2015 forward, the October 17, 2024 incident represents the 10th DCS report involving this family. Now, guys, I do have discussion questions here that I wanted to visit with Russ. So I'm going to read them to you guys. I would love if you guys want, you can answer them in the comments just to kind of keep the dialogue going. But hopefully I'll be able to connect with Russ and go over some of these questions with him. But I'll just give you the discussion questions as we come to them. But I'm not going to answer them. I think you'll see the answers along the way in the script. But I really want to have this dialogue with Russ. But I still would like to toss you guys the questions because we could still have the dialogue in the comments. So for the first discussion question, me and Russ were going to go over was a child jumps from a second-story window, runs to strangers, shows visible injuries, and says, I don't feel safe at home. So in your view, what should happen next? Immediately that same day. Okay, now I want to go to part two, the system's response and the decision. So this is what actually happened, what my research was able to show, and definitely with Russ's assistance. The police take Rebekah to Phoenix Children's Hospital for a full medical evaluation. At the hospital, doctors examine her, document her injuries. You got the bloody lip, the bruising on her hands and feet, and document what she told police. They do something critically important. They make a formal report to the Arizona Department of Child Safety. At this point, we have three major systems that have been activated. We got law enforcement, right? We got police responded, documented injuries, took statements. Then we got medical. Hospital evaluated her, confirmed injuries, documented concerns. And then we got Child Protective Services. DCS was formally notified by medical professionals. This wasn't a phone call from a neighbor who thought they heard something. This was a child who literally jumped from a window to escape, told authorities she was being beaten, showed visible injuries, and said she didn't feel safe. An official police report is generated. Everything is documented. The paper trail exists. And here's something that makes this moment even more significant. DCS already had a file on this family, a thick file, dating back 9 years to when Rebekah was just a baby. The decision now. Rebekah's parents are contacted. Her father, Richard Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, are asked about the injuries and the allegations. So, of course, they deny everything. They tell authorities that Rebekah hurt herself. They said she's not being abused, and they maintain they're doing nothing wrong. And critically, Baptiste and Woods told officers that an earlier DCS case involving Rebekah's bruising had already been closed. That's critical. They essentially argued that child protection authorities had already investigated and cleared them. They were right. DCS had investigated and multiple times, and every single case had been closed. So that matters, guys. That matters. So now you have a 9-year-old girl saying she's being beaten with objects and doesn't feel safe. Parents saying she hurt herself and everything's fine. Parents pointing to a pattern of previous DCS investigations that were all closed and a DCS file showing nearly a decade of reports, all resolved without removal. Police note these conflicting accounts in their reports. Now, I've been looking at questions that were asked about this case because this case is pretty much under a lot of people's awareness or radar. So one of the questions I saw that I thought was relevant at this point was, did police see signs of abuse but still return her home? So the answer is yes. They documented visible injuries, but here's the critical distinction. Seeing injuries is not the same as being able to prove how they occurred. Without witnesses, without a confession, without definitive medical evidence of non-accidental trauma, the system characterized this as conflicting accounts where the child's word was weighed against the parents' denials and the history of closed cases. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people frustrated right now, but I have a video I want to show from Law and Crime Sidebar with Jesse Weber. There's a professional that comes on. She explains a lot of this, but I wanted to provide something that was a bit more objective. So this kind of gives you the other perspective. So the big thing is the closed cases. That's the big thing. So the October 17, 2024 investigation was closed in 32 days. On November 18, 2024, the disposition is unsubstantiated. And I want to explain what that means. And I'm also going to have the Law and Order video also explains this bit, but I want to get to that. So this word matters, unsubstantiated. It doesn't mean the abuse didn't happen. Sorry. It doesn't mean DCS proved Rebekah was lying. It means they couldn't gather enough evidence to meet their burden of proof. So I saw another common question. Did authorities believe Rebekah when she told them she wasn't safe? The tragic answer is that belief wasn't the issue. Evidence standards were. The system required her direct statements to be corroborated by something beyond her word and visible injuries. When parents denied everything and claimed self-inflicted harm, and when there were no witnesses, the system couldn't substantiate the case, even though her statements were documented, consistent, and later proven true by medical findings. No charges are filed, no emergency removal happens, no sustained intervention is put in place. And according to the official DCS child fatality summary report, Rebekah was never removed from her father's custody. Not after this report, not after any of the previous reports, while she lived with him and Anisha Woods. Now, that's extremely frustrating because I believe that is one of our main concerns. Now, if Russ was on here, I had a discussion question for him, but I would toss it your way now, and maybe it's something we can build upon in the comments. So the investigation was closed in 32 days when policy allows up to 90 days. I think if there's 60 days, then you can even get an extension from the supervisor. But unsubstantiated means couldn't prove it, not that it didn't happen. Given that this was the 10th report about this family, should there be different standards for how quickly cases can be closed and what unsubstantiated should trigger when there's a documented pattern? And should a child's direct, consistent statements carry more weight than they currently do? Now, what I would like to do here is go over the decade of warning. These are going to be what was reported to DCS, the findings. I got this from a report that Russ sent me, and then I'm going to play a video from Law and Crime. That video is a great breakdown. They have a good expert here, and they kind of break down these findings. So the complete history, DCS already knew. So the October 2024 gas station incident wasn't an isolated event. According to official DCS child fatality summary report, the department had been involved with this family for nearly a decade. But before we get into that timeline, we need to understand Rebekah's family situation and what happened when the system actually did intervene, and why that makes what came later even more devastating. So let's try so we can get an understanding of Rebekah's family and the dependency system, because that's important too. Rebekah Baptiste was born into a family that would cycle in and out of the child welfare system for her entire life. Her parents, Richard Baptiste, and her mother, whose name has been kept private in public records, were the subject of DCS investigations from the time Rebekah was an infant. When Child Protective Services finds that abuse or neglect has occurred and a child is unsafe, they can file what's called a dependency petition with the juvenile court. This is a legal action that essentially says this child depends on the state for protection because their parents cannot or will not keep them safe. And I actually got very familiar with that term during the Melody Buzzard case, because when they didn't know where Melody was, people were pushing, why don't you push for dependency, bring that child over to the state. So it plays out here. So it's good as you get to learn these cases, because the good thing about it is that you start to get familiar with things. So again, I'm learning just like you are. I'm not an expert here at all, not even close, but I have a way of getting some information, having a way to discuss it, And my big thing is to bring about awareness, but also to get that communication in the comment section. So when a dependency petition is filed, the court takes jurisdiction over the child's welfare. DCS can remove the child from the home and place them in foster care. Parents are typically given services and a chance to reunify. The court monitors the case and makes decisions about the child's future, and if parents don't improve, their parental rights can be terminated. This is the most serious intervention the system can make. It's not something done lightly. It requires evidence, court approval, and ongoing judicial oversight. A question many people are asking online is why weren't dependency proceedings used again when the father had custody? And we're going to get to that because the earlier, when Rebekah was a lot younger, before the custody of her was given to her father, there was custody taken away from her mom, and that was through a dependency hearing. But then people were upset because they said, well, why couldn't they do that again with Rebekah's father when they had all these subsequent allegations or concerns? So again, why weren't dependency proceedings used again when her father had custody? That's exactly the right question that people are asking. Here's what's critical to understand. The system used this process with Rebekah's mother, but it never used it when her father had custody, despite 7 investigations in 3 years. So I want to show you guys the timeline. So we have the early years. This is between 2015 and 2017, and this is when both parents had custody. So I got August 29, 2015. When Rebekah was just months old, DCS received a report alleging neglect by her mother and father. The report alleged concerns about the conditions of the home and possible drug use by parents. The results, unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. But again, it wasn't enough to disprove it either, because you have unsubstantiated, substantiated, and something equivalent to unfounded or ruled out. Unfounded is when there's enough evidence to prove that the statement that is being alleged is in conflict, and that maybe it could be proven that the statement is false through evidence. Substantiated is the statement is legit, and unsubstantiated just means just not enough to prove it either way. And that's a concern here. That's a big concern. That statement is a very, very big concern. And again, so it was unsubstantiated. DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. And that case was closed on May 12, 2016. Now, it didn't go unnoticed. I'll get back to it. For that first case, that's August 29, 2015. And it closed May 12, 2016. That's almost a year later. Was that around 9 months later? I'm going to get to that. So now you have another case, May 5th, 2016. So we like to think that things are quiet up to this point. But remember, the first case has not been closed yet. So May 5th, 2016, a second report alleged neglect by Rebekah's mother and father. The report alleged Rebekah had severe diaper rash and an ear infection that wasn't being addressed. That came out as unsubstantiated. The allegation was unsubstantiated. Family was referred to Building Resilient Families, which is a support program. From what I hear, every time they were offered something, they didn't take it. And that's going to be spelled out a little bit more in the video I'm going to show you. And case closed was May 12, 2016. The funny thing about this, I must say, when they had the second report and they're talking about a diaper rash and ear infection that wasn't being addressed, I'm surprised that they couldn't prove that either way. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that came out unsubstantiated. Again, I'm going to get to the first case being closed so late, but let's just continue going to the timeline. October 31st, 2017, DCS received a report alleging neglect by Rebekah's mother and father. The report alleged that a 10-month-old child, one of Rebekah's younger siblings, was being left alone for several hours. That becomes unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The family was provided a list of community resources and daycare options, which they declined. Case closed, and that was December 29, 2017, so around 2 months. At this point, Rebekah was about 2 years old. She was living with both her mother and father. 3 investigations in, 3 years. all closed as unsubstantiated. And guys, I will tell you one thing. Just as much as there's an effort to substantiate a claim, there's also should be the same effort to look for the claim to be unfounded and rule it out, especially in cases like this. So now when the mother lost custody, so now we're at 2019 to 2021. Something changed in 2019. We don't know the exact circumstances of when or why Rebekah's parents separated, but by March of 2019, when the next DCS report came in, the system's response was dramatically different. March 14, 2019, DCS received a report alleging neglect by Rebekah's mother and father. The report alleged the mother had exposed a child to substances during her pregnancy. That came out substantiated. This is the first and one of only 2 substantiated findings in 12 investigations. And I'm sure that would be easy to figure out, order a urine while she's pregnant and just see if what she tests for or see what's in the house. The DCS investigation resulted in Rebekah and her sibling being removed from the home and placed in out-of-home care. So that's foster care. A dependency petition was filed with the Maricopa County Superior Court, and the court took jurisdiction over the children. Services were provided to the parents. By 2022, Richard Baptiste had been awarded physical custody of Rebekah by court order. The exact circumstances aren't detailed in public record, but what we know is the mother's case continued to deteriorate. Richard Baptiste was seen as the safer parent. The dependency case involving Rebekah was eventually dismissed on May 12, 2023, and Rebekah went to live with her father. Now, July 26, 2021, DCS received another report alleging neglect by Rebekah's mother and father. The report alleged the mother had exposed another child to substances during pregnancy. That's substantiated. That's the second substantiated finding. The child was removed from the home and placed in a foster care home. A dependency petition was filed with Maricopa County Superior Court. The department provided services to the family through the open dependency case. Richard Baptiste relinquished his parental rights to this child. The mother's parental rights were terminated, and the dependency was dismissed on December 15, 2022. So here's what happened. Between 2019 and 2022, DCS found abuse, neglect, substantiated when the mother was involved. Children were removed. Court oversight was established. The mother eventually lost all parental rights to at least one child, and Richard Baptiste gained full custody of Rebekah. The system worked when it came to Rebekah's mother. The pattern was recognized. Action was taken. Children were protected. A little delayed, but it's definitely more action than they took with Richard. Now, this is going to bring us to the new household, father and girlfriend. So that brings us to Richard and Nicia. So by 2022, Rebekah was living in a new household. Her father, Richard Baptiste, had full custody. Richard's girlfriend, Anicia Woods, was acting as stepmother, and Rebekah had at least 2 younger brothers also living in the home. We don't know exactly when Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods began their relationship, but by the time the report started coming in about this household in late 2023, Anicia Woods was clearly established as a parental figure in the home. And here's where the pattern becomes devastating. So now this is the final years with father and Anicia Woods. So now we're looking at 2023 to 2025. We have 7 investigations that I saw, 0 removals. So November 2nd of 2023, DCS received the report alleging physical abuse to a child by Anicia Woods. The report alleged the child had a scratch on their neck that was caused by Miss Woods. That was unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. Community resources were provided to the family. All other services were declined by the family. Case closed December 28, 2023. January 30th, 2024, DCS received a report alleging neglect to Rebekah and a child by their father, Richard Baptiste. That was unsubstantiated. The allegation was unsubstantiated. The case was still open when a second report came in on February 13, 2024. February 13, 2024. So mind you, now you have cases that are open, and before that can close, there's another case opening. February 13, 2024, DCS received a report alleging physical abuse to a child by Anicia Woods. The report alleged the child had a scratch on their neck that was caused by Miss Woods. Unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The family was provided a list of community resources. Case closed March 22nd, 2024. September 13, 2024. DCS received a report alleging physical abuse to a child by Anicia Woods. The report alleged the child had a scratch on her neck caused by Miss Woods and had a bump on their hand. Unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The case was still open when a second report came in on October 17, 2024. That brings us to the most recent update that we had within this timeline that just came out. And this was October 17, 2024, the gas station escape. DCS received a report alleging neglect to Rebekah by her father, Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods. The report alleged that Rebekah was observed with marks on her hands and feet and that the children were disciplined through exercise. Unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegations were unsubstantiated. Case closed November 18, 2024. That's 32 days after the report. Very quick. And January 16, 2025, DCS received a report alleging neglect to Rebekah by her father and Anicia Woods. The report alleged that Mr. Baptiste would have Rebekah run as a form of punishment while not allowing her bathroom or water breaks. That came out to be unsubstantiated. The DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegations were unsubstantiated. Case closed February 28, 2025. Now we have May 19, 2025. DCS received a report alleging physical abuse to Rebekah and her siblings by Anicia Woods, specifically that the children were being spanked as a form of punishment. Investigation incomplete. The department made efforts to engage the family by visiting their home in Phoenix and the children's school. However, during the course of the investigation, the family moved to Concho, Arizona. The department did not have updated contact information. The investigation was still ongoing when the near fatality report was received on July 27, 2025. So the case was still open, which means when they couldn't find her, what were the efforts to find out what happened to them? And I'm going to show you where they moved to. I have a video on that. The devastating pattern. So I want to make this crystal clear. When Rebekah's mother had custody, you had two investigations resulted in substantiated findings. Children were removed from the home. Dependency petitions were filed. Court oversight was established. The mother eventually lost parental rights. The system worked to some extent. It worked better. When Rebekah's father and his girlfriend had custody, 7 investigations in 3 years, all closed as unsubstantiated, no dependency petitions filed, no court oversight, no removal, not even temporarily, not even after a dramatic window escape, not even when a child said, I don't feel safe. And I think at this point, that's where you see that the system failed repeatedly. That's just my opinion. We'll love your thoughts on that. And here's the most damning detail. DCS had an active ongoing investigation when Rebekah died. They knew the family had moved. They had lost contact with them. They were still trying to locate them when she was found dying on the highway. Now, what we don't know and should is the DCS Child Fatality Summary Report documents that these investigations occurred and how they were closed, but it doesn't explain the investigative process that led to each unsubstantiated finding or determination. We don't know what specific evidence was gathered in each investigation, who was interviewed and what they said, what standard of proof was applied, whether investigators reviewed the cumulative history when assessing each new report, why the pattern of 12 reports over 10 years didn't trigger a different response, what evidence would have been required to substantiate the allegation, and why the same system that successfully used dependency proceedings with the mother never considered them with the father. What we do know from the October 2024 case is that when faced with a child's direct allegation with visible injuries, parents' denials claiming self-inflicted harm, a hospital's formal report to DCS, a documented history of 9 previous investigations, the system characterized this as conflicting accounts, closed the investigation in 32 days, and marked it unsubstantiated. That's from the October incident of 2024. There's also a troubling pattern in the investigation timeline themselves. The August 29, 2015 case. Now, I want to go back to the first one that was filed with the mother and father when they were together, because I saw that, wow, that's the first one to the second one. The first one closed at the same exact date. The second one closed, and the second one was open almost a year later, 8 or 9 months later, August and May, August of 16 or 2015, and then it closed in May of 2016. I think it was May 12th. At the same time, the second open case closed, which was filed in May of 2016. So I want to explain that, what I think. So there's also a troubling pattern in the investigation timelines themselves. The August 29, 2015 case, the very first DCS investigation with Rebekah, when Rebekah was an infant, remained open for 8.5 months before being closed on May 12, 2016. Notably, the May 5th, 2016 case was also closed on the exact same day, just 7 days after that second report came in. This strongly suggests the 2015 case may have been sitting open without active investigation for months, only to be revisited and closed when the new 2016 report came in and DCS realized they had an older open case. And this wasn't the only time we see this pattern. The January 30, 2024 case was still open when a second report came in on February 13, 2024. And the September 13, 2024 case was still open when a second report came in on October 17, 2024. But they're still within that 30, 60, 90 day of opening and closing an investigation. The first one was 8.5 months. What this tells us is that DCS has a documented pattern. I'm just showing you guys your thoughts, but bear with me just by what the pattern says. Opening investigations, letting them sit without resolution for extended periods, only revisiting them when new reports trigger attention, or then closing multiple cases simultaneously. And that really is leaning on the strength of that first documented case from August of 2015, which wasn't closed to May of 2016. This means children like Rebekah were living at home under active investigation for months without any protective action being taken because the investigations weren't actually active. They were, I guess you could say, stalled. The absence of a detailed investigative record makes it impossible to know whether the problem was inadequate investigation and possibly high evidentiary standards, failure to consider cumulative patterns, bias in how fathers versus mothers are investigated, or cases sitting forgotten due to high caseloads and turnover, or all the above. I know a lot of people will probably sit with the cases sitting forgotten due to high caseloads and turnover. What are your thoughts on that? So this is the discussion question I was going to toss to Russ. I want to toss to you guys, get your thoughts on it. Looking at this timeline, the system successfully substantiated abuse and removed children when the mother had custody, but marked 7 straight investigations unsubstantiated when the father and his girlfriend had custody. What does this tell us about potential bias, evidentiary standards, or investigative thoroughness? Should the dependency process that worked with the mother have been considered after the 3rd, 5th, or 7th investigation of the father's household? And should DCS be required to publicly document, at least in cases that result in fatalities, the specific investigative steps taken and reasoning behind decisions? What about cases that sit open for months without resolution? Should there be mandatory timelines for actions or closure? Now, I want to show you this video. This is the longest video I got. It's about 20 minutes. But I want to show you it because it's a real good video from Sidebar. Now, guys, this is a very informative video. I'm going to let it play out. There may be some commercials. I'll just skip over them. But I really want you guys to see this video. Hopefully I don't get copyright striked.
They found her in the wash.
Okay.
And she's been unresponsive.
We didn't know where else to take her. There's no hospital near here. They're like stacked up like that's it.
New documents from the Arizona Department of Child Safety reveal a decade-long trail of chilling details leading up to the death of 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste. And this is raising questions about what more could have been done to protect this little girl from what prosecutors describe as horrific torture. We are going to break down the multiple reports and explain how it ended this way. And we're going to do it all with a former child abuse prosecutor who knows the ins and outs of this system. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We've been following this horrible story of Arizona 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste, whose life ended after what prosecutors described as prolonged and maybe some of the worst abuse we have documented here on Law and Crime Sidebar. Because now, new documents from the Arizona Department of Child Safety reveal a history of prior concerns, alleged neglect, maybe even missed opportunities to protect her. Maybe after hearing this, you will make that argument. You will feel that way. And this apparently stretches over a decade. According to the reports, Rebekah and her siblings were the subject of multiple calls to DCS over the years, citing physical abuse, neglect, unsafe living conditions. Many of these allegations were deemed unsubstantiated. There were others that led to temporary removals and dependency cases, but ultimately, the children were returned to their father. And the latest documents also show that at the time of Rebekah's death, some of these investigations were still ongoing. We obtained these reports. We're going to get into these details. But first, for anyone who hasn't been following this case, here's a quick recap. So prosecutors say Rebekah's life was marked by prolonged abuse at the hands of her father, 32-year-old Richard Baptiste, and his 29-year-old girlfriend, Anicia Woods. She was found unresponsive on the ground near a highway intersection on July 27th and tragically died from these injuries 3 days later on July 30th. That is what authorities are alleging. Now, investigators say that Rebekah had been living in this remote home with her father in Woods, and she had apparently run away multiple times. The body cam footage from first responders, it is so hard to watch because it paints a grim picture of what they encountered at this scene.
They found her in the wash.
Okay.
And she's been unresponsive.
We didn't know where else to take her.
Who's her parents?
Right here. Oh, sorry.
No, she ran away. She's on medications. And she hasn't been on these medications in about a month.
How long has it been since you found her unresponsive?
We don't know. The neighbor
When did the neighbor bring her?
It's 11:48. It had to have been probably close to 11.
Did she have any signs of life when she got brought to you?
She was almost basically like this. She was slightly responsive. She was still breathing on her own. And then as we were driving this way, started seeing color change in her lips, and we were just hauling it.
And you can watch the rest of that dramatic body cam footage in one of our previous episodes of Sidebar. So Rebekah was rushed to a medical facility and she died 3 days later. And investigators, they documented extensive injuries, including bruising in multiple stages of healing, missing toenails, signs of both physical and sexual abuse. Richard Baptiste initially claimed the injuries were accidental, but allegedly admitted to using excessive force. Woods reportedly showed minimal concern for Rebekah's condition, despite claiming experience as a certified nursing assistant. And now, both Baptiste and Woods face first-degree murder and child abuse charges. They were initially held without bond, though a judge later set a $1 million bond for each of them. The case, by the way, just raises serious questions about prior reports to the Arizona Department of Child Safety, which had been reportedly contacted multiple times before Rebekah's death. And this brings us to the latest developments. The official DCS reports that detail allegations of neglect, abuse, and unsafe conditions that go back 10 years. We are going to break all this down. To help me do that, I want to bring on a special guest, practice professor of law and former child abuse and sex crimes prosecutor, Marian Bracha. Thank you so much for coming on. It's always good to see you. From your experience, how typical is it for a child welfare agency like DCS to receive multiple reports over a decade without substantiated findings, even in cases that tragically result in a death? Because I think a number one question a lot of people have is, obviously, whatever happened here, could it have been prevented? Could they have stepped in? Could something have been done? What's your take on this?
So I don't have statistics on nationwide statistics, or certainly statistics from Arizona specifically on the number or the rate of reporting that's done to DCS and then eventually if there are fatalities that result. What I will say is that in cases like this and in cases of severe child abuse, it is rare that there be no documented history with DCS or with a Department of Welfare for child safety. And so the fact that there is such a robust and documented history of concerns being expressed, of reports being made, of essentially calls for help to DCS from school officials is not uncommon. I think what unfortunately is uncommon or singular and tragic in this case is the fact that, of course, the fatality resulted.
And in this case, in the Rebekah Baptiste case, there were these prior allegations that were deemed unsubstantiated, but you had others that led to temporary removals, dependency cases. How do we think about that? How should prosecutors, how should child welfare officials, how do they interpret unsubstantiated findings? I mean, what does that tell you?
Yeah, unfortunately, that is something that is a matter of statute. So that's not necessarily something that prosecutors would have any input on, or prosecutors would have any decision-making authority on. So DCF is regulated by certain statutes and by guidelines that dictate that child removal from a home or from parental supervision is a means of last resort. It is something that can only be done if there is clear and imminent danger to the child, if there is an ongoing risk of harm, of ongoing abuse to the child that is present, that is imminent. And so there is a standard that needs to be met to find that those claims are substantiated, not just that a report was made. Unfortunately, not even if there is evidence that there is bruising or there is injury that is healing. It needs to be a present danger to the child. And according to the DCF records, every time caseworkers went out and responded to the reports and checked on the children, there was not a present danger happening. Now, of course, an argument can be made that there is ongoing abuse and the child lives in present danger.
And by the way, there is this idea that you want to make sure that you keep the family intact as much as possible and you don't want to interfere unless you absolutely have to, right?
I think that is the philosophy behind the guideline, yes.
Now I want to talk about this legal case. So Richard Baptiste, Nesia Woods, they now face first-degree murder charges, child abuse charges. And from a prosecutorial standpoint, could these prior DCS reports, these unsubstantiated allegations, could they be used at trial? Could they factor into proving intent, recklessness, knowledge, whatever have you? Could it actually come in?
I think maybe. The quintessential law school professor answer is it depends. So we ordinarily think about any case, any incident, whether we're in criminal court prosecuting someone or civil court where two private citizens are suing each other. We think about those cases as just case specific, as this particular incident. And we don't want to go all corners of the earth to talk about other incidents. It's called other acts evidence. There are specific circumstances and specific exceptions that apply in the rules of evidence that will allow for that other act evidence be considered by the fact finder. In this case, as you mentioned, the fact that there might be evidence of intent, might be evidence of preparation or plan or absence of mistake to show that whatever happened to Rebekah was not accidental, it was in fact intentional, and to show that she had been traumatized, harmed, physically abused in a certain way over a period of time goes to show that there was no mistake or accident in this particular case, that it was actually an intentional injury inflicted that resulted in the death.
So let's dive into this. Let's dive into these reports, because as we can clearly see straight from the Arizona Department of Child Safety, this was not the first time that DCS had been involved with this family. According to the documentation that was obtained by Law and Crime, the very first report came on August 29, 2015, alleging neglect by Rebekah's parents, citing concerns about the condition of the home, possible drug use. However, I will tell you, the report notes, quote, the DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegation was unsubstantiated. And according to DCS, that case was still open when a second report came in on May 5th, 2016, claiming Rebekah had a severe diaper rash and an ear infection. And DCS again says they found no supporting evidence and referred the family to support services, closing that case a week later. Then you go to October 31st, 2017, another report alleged a 10-month-old child was left alone for several hours. DCS noted the family was provided a list of community resources and daycare, which they declined. So that case was later closed as well. And then finally, there was a substantiated intervention, an instance where DCS actually removed the children from the home. And we're going to get there. But first, Professor, now that I've kind of laid out a little bit more detail, what are your thoughts on this? How, when you see multiple reports here, I know they're limited in what they can do, but anybody watching this is going to say, I don't get it.
And I think that reaction is perfectly reasonable. And I think that it goes against common sense to hear all of these instances of third-party actors being so concerned that they're picking up the phone and calling DCS and saying that there is something amiss in this household. This child is not safe. This child is not being cared for. And repeatedly, these reports are being found unsubstantiated. So I think your listeners would be reasonable to say something was amiss. Someone missed something pretty significant here. But again, DCS is going to rest on the language in their statute and the language in their governing regulations that say that the danger to the child needs to be imminent and present. And those factors, according, again, to their caseworkers, were missing in this case.
So after 4 years of reports, right, from 2015 to 2019, there was no meaningful intervention that actually occurred. Now, that changed on March 14th, 2019, when, according to the report, Rebekah and her siblings were removed from the home following allegations that Rebekah's birth mother had exposed a child to substances during pregnancy. And it is important to note here that Anicia Woods, Baptiste's girlfriend, was not Rebekah's birth mother. Okay. But a dependency petition was filed in Maricopa County Superior Court, and services were provided to the family. And this process eventually led to Richard Baptiste being granted full custody of the children in 2022, with the children reunited with their father, and the dependency cases were dismissed in 2023 and 2024. Now, by the way, we're actually talking about something happening here, Professor. So when you have a substantiated intervention, you're talking about removal. How does that work exactly? What should we be thinking about that?
So it is a very high level intervention. So we're talking about taking children away from their home, taking children away from their parents, either their biological parents or their legal guardians. And it is not a permanent removal, certainly. I believe in Arizona, the removal period is 72 hours. Do an investigation of the home, to have the children placed in emergency placement with a licensed foster home or foster site. And so there is always, and frankly, more likely the possibility that after that 72-hour evaluation that the children will be returned to their home, the place from which they were removed. But if there is a finding after that 72-hour period that the home is not safe to go back to, that if the children were to be returned, that the danger would be present and ongoing, then the children can be more permanently placed in foster care.
So then you go to 2023, and the report shows the first claims involving Baptiste's girlfriend, Anicia Woods. And it's starting in November 2023. Reports began surfacing alleging that Woods had scratched a child on the neck. However, the DCS investigation determined that allegation, again, unsubstantiated. According to the report, community supports were provided to the family and all other services were declined by the family. So just real quick, Professor, they don't have to take services, right? And is that not a warning sign? If they're being offered, if there's an allegation that something's going on, they offer them services, they decline those services, that can't be, I don't know what the best way to say it, that can't be used against them, that can't be evidence to remove the children or anything of that nature?
To remove the children, unfortunately, I think not. In a courtroom during this prosecution, it probably could, to be shown that there was every opportunity to avail themselves of services, of assistance, of help, of social services that perhaps were needed in this household, and they specifically chose not to, and to continue disciplining the children in a particular way, or caring or not caring for the children in a particular way. So I think that in terms of the homicide prosecution, it is actually pertinent there. I'm not sure it can be so used against them in terms of DCS's action.
Then you go to February 13th, 2024. Okay, so DCS received another report alleging abuse by Anicia Woods, and that investigation too was deemed unsubstantiated and the case was closed. Now, later that year, September, October 2024, there were new reports that emerged alleging physical abuse and neglect, specifically that Rebekah had marks on her hands and her feet, and that the children were being disciplined through exercise. Once again, DCS found no evidence to support the allegations. According to the report, the DCS investigation did not result in evidence to support the allegation. The allegations were unsubstantiated. The case closed on November 18th, 2024. Professor, I'm not trying to cast blame here, but I have to ask, have there been lawsuits? Has there been legal action taken against Child Protective Services in the past? I'm not saying that's what should happen here. I'm not saying they're at fault, just asking the question.
Oh, there certainly have been, Jesse. There certainly have been. I don't know about Arizona specifically. It is entirely possible to sue a social service agency civilly. So the estate or the survivors of Rebekah Baptiste would certainly be within their right to investigate legal action or cause of action against DCS. I know very specifically in Pennsylvania, a heartbreaking case from almost a decade ago involved a young girl, a 14-year-old girl named Danielle Kelly, and the social workers from our Department of Human Services who were supposed to be caring for her essentially falsified their records and were not checking on her. We're not ensuring that she was being fed and cared for medically. She was 14 years old and she was 42 pounds when she died. And those two social workers were prosecuted and convicted of involuntary manslaughter. So it is entirely possible for there to be both civil and criminal remedies when it comes to the neglect of social services.
I'm glad you clarified that. Yeah, I'm glad you expanded upon that. I'm not saying that's what should happen here, but when you're looking at these multiple reports and at least one instance where there was a substantiated intervention, I'm just wondering. Now, we go to January 16th, 2025, okay? So a few months ago. And there was a report alleging that Richard Baptiste had made Rebekah run as punishment without, by the way, bathroom or water breaks. And on May 19th, 2025, Woods was alleged to have spanked Rebekah and her siblings. So DCS attempted to engage the family, but they lost contact when they moved to Concho, Arizona. And that investigation was still ongoing when Rebekah's injuries, which would eventually, according to prosecutors and law enforcement, be fatal, were reported on July 27, 2025. Following Rebekah's death, DCS took immediate action, saying, following an assessment of child safety, the other children were removed and placed in a licensed foster home. A joint investigation was conducted with the Apache County Sheriff's Office. The department continues to provide services to Rebekah's siblings. Well, I guess, Professor, that was the time they needed to. I mean, after something like this happens, they had no choice. But at the same time, it's, I don't know. What do you make of that response?
It is certainly troubling, to say the least, right? I think, though, that what DCF, again, would rest on is that, listen, these are the statutes, these are the regulations that we are governed by. And if there is to be any change in what we can do in terms of removal, in terms of intervening more aggressively, in terms of having more aggressive contact with the family when there is a report that comes through, then these regulations and these regulations and these statutes need to be amended, and they need to be amended administratively, they need to be amended legislatively. But until that time, DCF will always claim that they are bound by their governing rules.
Now, guys, remember that video was done about 4 months ago. So the rest will go into something that I'm going to update already, so we don't need to really watch the end of it. But I do want to show you where they moved to. This is where I believe DCF may have lost track of them. And I have that here. Thought you'd find this interesting.
New developments in the murder of Rebekah Baptiste. The 10-year-old's father and his girlfriend are facing charges in her death. Our Ashley Holden has been following Rebekah's case every step of the way, from uncovering the murder investigation to tracking the questions that have come to light about the Department of Child Safety and if more could have been done to prevent Rebekah's death.
And tonight, Ashley is on the ground in Apache County, where Rebekah was found unresponsive. She's taking a closer look at where that case stands.
It breaks my heart.
For the first time, we're getting a bird's eye view of the yurt where Rebekah Baptiste was living in rural Apache County and hearing from the neighbors in this remote area.
To this day, I think about Rebekah. Never got to meet the little girl. I mean, she's 10 years old. How can you? I can't fathom what she was going through.
Toys can still be spotted at the Baptiste property, which can only be reached by driving down winding dirt roads. But the investigation into what happened to 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste started here at this intersection in Holbrook.
And she's been running away for the last 3 or 4 weeks since we've been here. Okay. She ran away this morning.
Rebekah's dad, Richard Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, caught on body camera prior to their arrest and Rebekah's death. Officers meeting the family, finding the young girl severely injured.
And your neighbors found her?
Neighbor found her, yeah.
Okay, what were they doing down there? How'd they find her?
They were on quads.
They were on their quads?
And it's not nice terrain. There's a lot of cactus, a lot of brush, trees, and it's pure sand out here.
Richard Jolly showing us Facebook posts in their neighborhood group from one of the previous times Rebekah ran away. He says the community was led to believe the young girl was struggling with mental health issues.
Pure anger. Pure anger.
But now he and others left with so many emotions and questions.
Like I said, no child should live in fear. To do this to a child is I believe the worst thing that you can do.
Records from Navajo County show during an interview, Woods telling detectives Rebekah would hide in a tree, waiting for an adult to ask if she could live with them. Both Baptiste and Woods allegedly admitting to using a belt as punishment. That report says Baptiste admitted to using excessive force. People across the state now using their voice to push for change.
If you see it, say something. Follow up.
ABC 15 is still waiting for records requests and responses from multiple agencies, including the State Department of Child Safety. Baptiste and Woods charged with murder and child abuse and are due back in court next month. Ashley Holden, ABC 15, Arizona.
Thank you, Ashley. ABC 15 has been pushing for answers and accountability following Rebekah's death.
All right, so now let's go to the teachers, the school that wouldn't stop trying. So teachers are mandated reporters. So 12 calls that no one heard. While DCS was opening and closing case after case, marking them all unsubstantiated, there were people who saw Rebekah every single day, her teachers at Empower College Prep in Phoenix. School staff made at least 12 calls to the DCS hotline over approximately 18 to 24 months between late 2023 and early 2025. I saw some questions from people from the online. They were asking, is it 12 or 13 school reports, and why does that matter? Media reports consistently cite at least 12 calls from the school. Some sources say more than a dozen. The exact number varies slightly in reporting between 12 to 13, but what's not in dispute is this. The same school called repeatedly about the same child over many months, and the pattern should have triggered escalated response regardless of whether it was 12 or 13. 12 calls from the same school about the same child. I mean, this child never had a chance. Think about what it takes for a teacher to make the first call to DCS. You're accusing parents of harming their child. You're potentially starting an investigation that could tear a family apart. You're putting your professional judgment on the line. Now imagine making that call and nothing happens. So you call again and again, 12 times. We can see at least 7 DCS investigations that align with this time frame. You have November of 2023, January of 2024, February of 2024, September of 2024, October of 2024, which is when she escaped, jumped out the window, went to the gas station, January of 2025, and May of 2025. Every single one closed as unsubstantiated or still ongoing. The school was calling, teachers were reporting, concerns were being raised, and it was just constantly. And every case was either closed or in the final instance, the family disappeared during the investigation. And there was another question from this is, why do police and DCS sometimes have different counts for reports or calls? This is about procedural differences. A call to the hotline is not always the same as an investigation. Some hotline calls get screened out before becoming formal investigations. Some calls from multiple sources might get consolidated into one investigation. Police may have their own count of times they contacted DCS, which could differ from DCS count of formal investigations opened. The key point is that whether it's 12 calls, 13 calls, or 7 formal investigations, that the pattern was clear and should have triggered action. Now, this was a discussion question I was going to toss to Russ. Toss it your way. What are your thoughts? When the same school makes 12 calls about the same child over 18 to 24 months, at what number should that automatically trigger a different kind of response? Should 3 calls from the same source escalate the case? 5? Should mandatory reporters from institutions like schools have their cumulative concerns weighed differently than single reports? Because they are mandated reporters. All right, now this brings us to the final months when everything accelerated. I'm sorry, guys, I am under the weather, so thank you for being patient with me. After the October 17, 2024 investigation, and when it was closed on November 18th, Rebekah went back to school. She was still living with her father in Anicia Woods. Teachers continued seeing concerning signs, and they continued calling. January 16, 2025, just 2 months after the October case closed, another report alleged that Richard Baptiste would have Rebekah run up as punishment while not allowing her bathroom or water breaks. This is exactly what Rebekah had told police in October, forced exercise as punishment. Investigation closed, unsubstantiated. Case closed was closed February 28, 2025. May 19, 2025. 3 months later, a report alleged physical abuse, that the children were being spanked as punishment. DCS began investigating. They visited the home in Phoenix. They visited the children's school. And then during the active investigation, the family moved. It's like they fled. They left Phoenix, where the school was, where the teachers who kept calling were, where DCS knew how to find them, and relocated to Concho, a small remote community in Apache County. According to the DCS reports, however, during the course of the investigation, the family moved to Concho, Arizona, and the department did not have updated contact information. The investigation was still ongoing when the near fatality report was received on July 27th, 2025. So DCS had an active open investigation when Rebekah died. They knew the family had moved. They didn't have contact information, and they were still trying to locate them. And then she died. Now, people are asking, why did the family move during an active DCS investigation, and how did that affect the case? The simple answer is that families are not legally required to notify DCS when they move, even during an active investigation. There's no tracking system, no requirement to provide updated contact information, no automatic flag when a family under investigation relocates to a different county. This is one of the systemic gaps that DCS has now identified as needing reform. Another question I got was, did living in a rural area like Concho delay or complicate monitoring? And I got yes. The move to a remote yurt in Apache County meant Rebekah was no longer attending the school that had been calling DCS repeatedly. The family was isolated from neighbors and community oversight. DCS investigators from Maricopa County would need to coordinate with Apache County. The family was harder to locate for welfare checks, and there were less chance of anyone noticing warning signs. Another question I was going to give to Russ, toss it your way, see what you guys think. Should families under active DCS investigations be legally required to notify the agency before moving? Should moving to a remote location during an open investigation trigger an automatic emergency response or court intervention? And what systems should be in place to track families across county lines when there's an open case? Makes sense. All right, guys, now this is the date everything pretty much ended. July 27, 2025. We saw the body-worn camera. On the afternoon of July 27, 2025, emergency responders were called to a rural area near Holbrook, Arizona, in the vicinity of State Route 180. 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste was found unresponsive. Her father, Richard Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, were with her when help arrived. From the moment first responders saw her, it was clear this was not a medical emergency that had suddenly appeared. Rebekah was severely malnourished and dehydrated. Her body showed extensive bruising. This was not a child who had collapsed unexpectedly. This was a child who had been suffering. Now, mind you, I believe she's 10 years old at the time. They said she was around 42 pounds, maybe. She was airlifted to Phoenix Children's Hospital, the same hospital that had evaluated her just 9 months earlier after she jumped from the second-story window to escape her home. Doctors fought for her life for 3 days. On July 30, 2025, Rebekah Baptiste died. What medical professionals documented afterwards would change this case forever. According to investigators and testimony later presented in court, Rebekah's injuries were consistent with severe, prolonged child abuse and child sexual abuse. Physicians and prosecutors used one word repeatedly to describe what her body showed evidence of, and it's torture. They said torture. She had extensive bruising across her body, signs of extreme neglect, injuries that did not come from a single incident, but from ongoing systematic harm over time. Medical findings were described by investigators and prosecutors as consistent with abuse so severe that it could not reasonably be explained away as discipline, accidents, or misinterpretation. And here is the most devastating part. What doctors found matched what Rebekah had been telling authorities all along. In October 2024, she said she was being hit with belts and brushes. She said she was being forced to exercise as punishment. In January 2025, a report alleged forced running without bathroom or water breaks. And in May of 2025, another report alleged physical abuse. Her allegations were consistent. Her story never changed. 9 months after she jumped from a window saying she wasn't safe, her body confirmed what she had been trying to tell adults for years. Another discussion question I was going to give Russ was, when medical findings confirm a child's allegations across multiple prior investigations that were labeled unsubstantiated, how should that reshape the way we define evidence, credibility, and risk in child protection decisions? I want to show you, I do have another video here. It's the community's response. I want to show you guys this.
I'm Ashley Holden. The murders of 3 kids known to DCS have sparked a push for change and accountability. That includes the death of Rebekah Baptiste. The 10-year-old's father and his girlfriend are charged in connection with her death. ABC 15 learning there were reports of alleged abuse coming into DCS even just months before she died. From the valley to rural Apache County.
There's a lot of people putting prayers out there and wishing that we could have done something more.
So many wondering how the death of 10-year-old Rebekah Baptiste could have been prevented.
Are you waiting for EMS? I'm waiting for them because I'm trying to get her breath.
That 911 call, one of several from Rebekah's dad, Richard Baptiste, and his girlfriend, Anicia Woods, on July 27th, as they drove from Apache County to this intersection in Holbrook.
She ran away this morning. We went out and tried to find her, and our neighbor found her.
This body camera video shows police rushing to meet the family, finding Rebekah severely injured and unresponsive. She later died. Baptiste and Woods both told officers about interactions with DCS prior to their arrest for murder and child abuse.
DCS kept having new cases open because Rebekah would go to school and had all these different allegations.
ABC 15 learning the family has been known to the department for a decade. DCS first removing Rebekah and her siblings in 2019. Years later, her dad granted physical custody. DCS providing a timeline of cases involving the family from 2023 to 2025, receiving 7 reports alleging abuse or neglect in the home, ranging from scratches, marks on Rebekah's hands and feet, and even forms of discipline that concerned neighbors shared with ABC 15.
Every single neighbor was concerned why the hell they made them run laps for hours without water.
The final report in May 2025 alleged physical abuse of Rebekah and her siblings by Woods, but DCS saying the department struggled to locate the family. Court records show in early July, they moved here to this yurt in rural Apache County.
We are meant as educators and social workers to use our voice, especially now where Rebekah does not have a voice any longer.
Rebekah's former school, Empower College Prep in Phoenix, says they reached out repeatedly to DCS.
We have reports where our staff made calls in good faith, having reasonable belief, following their criteria and guidelines that we have all been trained on.
DCS saying for the past 2 years, they did not find evidence to support the reported allegations. The department saying they didn't have enough under the law to take the kids.
I was lucky because we shared so many special memories together. I was lucky because I got to show you love when the people you wanted to most refused.
Empower holding a celebration of life for Rebekah, keeping the girl's memory alive while demanding serious change.
So Ashley joining me now. And Ashley, tell us about this stakeholder meeting that's happening tomorrow.
Yeah, so it's going to bring together lawmakers, tribal leadership, and law enforcement and others. They're going to be going over the state protocol and also kind of identifying immediate safety concerns, things that can be looked at immediately, and then some other long-term reforms as well. And this actually follows a public hearing that happened on the Emily Pike case earlier this year as well.
So hopefully taking action and soon.
And as you guys know, I'm sick, but I had all this information put together. I didn't want to sit on it. Okay, so let's go back to the arrest and charges, where we're at now. So a prosecutor is found on July 29, 2025, 2 days after Rebekah was found, 1 day before she died. Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods were arrested. Initial charges was attempted first-degree murder, aggravated assault, child abuse, kidnapping. After Rebekah died on July 30th, charges were amended to first-degree murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, multiple counts of child abuse, child molestation, and domestic violence enhancements. And critically, according to DCS reports, the other children in the home were removed and placed in a licensed foster home. The department filed a dependency petition with the Maricopa County Superior Court as to Rebekah's siblings. Her younger brothers were finally removed. After Rebekah died, a dependency petition, the same legal tool that had been used successfully with their mother years earlier, was finally filed. The same actions that could have been taken during any of the previous 7 investigations over 3 years. Investigators had everything. 12 DCS reports over 10 years, 7 unsubstantiated investigations in 3 years. October 2024, police report with Rebekah's exact words, "I don't feel safe at home." 12 calls from the school, pattern of consistent allegations matching medical findings, active investigation ongoing when she died, and a proven template for intervention. And that's the dependency that had worked with the mother. Both defendants held on $1 million bail, trial scheduled for June 2nd of 2026. Neither has entered a plea as of now that I could see. Question I was going to give Russ was the brothers were removed immediately after Rebekah's death and a dependency petition was filed. The same legal process that was used successfully when the mother had custody, but never considered during 7 investigations of the father's household. What does this tell us about the threshold for using this protective tool? And should that threshold be different when there's documented patterns? And as you saw on the Weber show, sidebar, it's the parental rights. Sometimes that could be a concern. And then I want to talk about the system reckons with failure. So Arizona's response. So Rebekah's death forced Arizona to confront a question no system ever wants to answer. How did this happen with this many warnings? Governor Katie Hobbs ordered a review of the Department of Child Safety handling of the case. Lawmakers demanded answers. Journalists began pulling records. The public outcry was immediate and justified. State Senator Corrine Werner announced the formation of the Bipartisan Child Abuse Task Force, specifically citing cases like Rebekah's as evidence that the system was failing to identify danger even when it appeared repeatedly. DCS released its child fatality summary report confirming what the public was beginning to understand. There had been 12 reports over 10 years, 7 investigations in the final 3 years, an active investigation at the time of Rebekah's death, and no removal, no sustained monitoring, and no successful intervention. The same dependency process that worked with the mother was never used with the father. Now, people are asking, what exactly did the new internal DCS review find, and will it lead to real changes? DCS internal review made public through investigative reporting identified the key systemic failures. One was a hotline intake gap. Critical details were lost or screened out before becoming investigations. They also noticed that there was a high staff turnover. Cases were treated as isolated incidents instead of patterns because investigators didn't stay long enough to see the cumulative risk. Then you have the difficulty evaluating non-biological caregivers. When the alleged abuser was a parent's partner, like Anicia Woods, rather than a biological parent, the system struggled a bit. Weak cross-county tracking. When families moved during investigations, cases could be lost, and over-reliance on prior unsubstantiated findings. The history of closed cases actually worked against recognizing danger. So DCS announced reform. They improved training. They want better data tracking, reduce supervisor caseloads, pilot programs to flag repeat investigations, and enhance cross-county coordination. But people are also asking, is DCS really going to fix the problem, or is this just talk? And what specific reforms are being proposed? Here's what actually is being discussed for 2026 legislation. Mandatory escalation thresholds, so multiple investigations within a time frame would automatically trigger intensive services or court oversight. Cross-county tracking requirements. Families under investigation must notify DCS of moves, automatic coordination between counties, school report aggregation. Multiple calls from the same source would be weighted cumulatively. Transparency in case closures. DCS would be required to document decisions making rationale, especially in repeat cases. And unsubstantiated doesn't mean case closed. Continued monitoring required after unsubstantiated findings when there's a pattern, as we mentioned earlier. Maximum time frames for open cases. Cases cannot sit open without active investigations or resolutions beyond a set period. But this case raises a harder question. What good are reforms if they only acknowledge failures after a child's dead? Every problem now being discussed was present when Rebekah was alive. The repeated reports, the consistent allegations, the school calling again and again, the dramatic escape, the active investigation when the family moved, the proven intervention tool, which is dependency that had worked before but was never used, and cases sitting open for months without active investigation. The system didn't lack information. It didn't lack tools. It lacked, sadly, action. This was a question I was going to toss to Russ, but I'll toss it your way. How do we ensure that reform isn't just retrospective, something that happens only after tragedy, but preventative? What mechanisms should exist to make sure patterns trigger protection before a child dies? And how can we hold DCS accountable for actually implementing these reforms rather than just announcing them? Now, I want to talk about the teachers, the helpers who couldn't save her. Imagine being one of Rebekah's teachers. You call DCS, nothing happens. You call again 12 times over 18 to 24 months. You see the bruises. You see her withdrawn. You see the signs. Then she stops coming to school. The family moved. And then you learn she's dead, tortured to death during an active DCS investigation by the same people you reported 12 times. Those teachers did everything right. They saw something, they said something over and over, and the system failed them as catastrophically as it failed Rebekah. This is why reform matters, not just for children, but for mandatory reporters who need to know their call matters. And a question for Russ, but I'll let this in your way. What do we owe the professionals who repeatedly report abuse and watch the system do nothing? Beyond moral support, what structural changes would restore their faith that calling DCS will actually protect children? And that's important. And then we have the phrase that we can't get out of our head. I don't feel safe at home. All the details in this case, one phrase haunts me the most. On October 17, 2024, during the 10th report about her family in 10 years, 9 years, on October 17, 2024, during the 10th report about her family, 9-year-old Rebekah Baptiste said, I don't feel safe at home. Not someone hit me once, not I had a fight with my parents, but she said, I don't feel safe at home. Safety is a basic human need. When a 9-year-old tells you her home isn't safe, when she jumps from a window to escape, when it's the 10th investigation in 10 years, what more do you need? She jumped from a window, risking serious injury. She ran to strangers. She told police exactly what was happening. She showed them her injury. She said she wasn't safe, and the investigation closed in 32 days, unsubstantiated. She stayed in the home. The same legal tool that had protected her from her mother, dependency proceedings, was never even considered to protect her from her father and his girlfriend. 9 months later, she died there. Across 12 reports, her allegations were consistent. One more question for Russ was, should a child's direct statement, I don't feel safe at home, especially during a repeat investigation with visible injuries, be enough by itself to require at least temporary removal while the investigation proceeds? Or should we maintain the current standard requiring additional corroborating evidence? So what does justice look like here beyond the courtroom? When Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods face trial in June of 2026, they may be convicted and sentenced to life in prison. That's criminal justice. It's important. But what about justice for Rebekah? Real justice would have been intervention after the third investigation, recognizing the pattern by the fifth, the school's 12 calls triggering action, October 2024 resulting in her removal, a dependency petition filed after repeated unsubstantiated investigations, the same tool that had worked with her mother, May of 2025 when the family moved during an investigation, triggering immediate welfare checks, and cases not sitting open for months without active investigation. Real justice would have been Rebekah growing up safe. We can't give her that. She's gone. So what can we do? We can demand accountability for every system that saw 12 investigations and did nothing. We can support real reform with teeth. Mandatory thresholds where multiple investigations trigger automatic escalation, cross-county tracking that doesn't lose families, different standards when the same school calls 12 times, unsubstantiated meaning continued monitoring, not case closed, automatic temporary removal when a child says, I don't feel safe during a repeat investigation, maximum timelines for open investigations, cases cannot sit stalled for months, transparency requirements, DCS must document and explain investigative decisions in cases with multiple reports, and consistency in using dependency proceedings. If it's appropriate for one parent, why not for the other when the pattern is even worse? We can make Rebekah's name mean something, not another statistic, but a turning point. The case that made us say, never again will 12 investigations go unheard or unheeded. So January 2026, Richard Baptiste and Anicia Woods remain in custody on $1 million bonds each. Trial scheduled for June 2nd of 2026. Next hearing is January 12th, 2026. Rebekah's brothers are in foster care, safe, finally with a dependency position filed to ensure court oversight of their protection, the same protection Rebekah never received. The Arizona Child Abuse Task Force is preparing reform proposals. DCS is implementing pilot programs, and across Arizona, across the country, people are asking, how could 12 investigations over 10 years, 7 in the final 3 years, a dramatic window escape, 12 school calls, and an active investigation where DCS lost contact with the family all failed to save one little girl who told them repeatedly she wasn't safe? Why was the dependency process used successfully with the mother but never considered for the father, even after 7 investigations? And why were cases allowed to sit open for months without active investigation or resolution? Will we finally listen? Will we build systems that track patterns across years, not just individual incidents? And will we use the tools that work consistently, regardless of which parent has custody? Will we ensure investigations are actually active, not just paperwork sitting in a file? And will we believe children the first time, or at least by the 12th time, when they tell us they're not safe? Rebekah jumped from a window seeking help during the 10th investigation of her family. Across 12 reports, her allegations were consistent. The question is, will we be? And the final word for this, as we wrap up, because there's a lot here, this case is still developing. The trial hasn't happened. The reforms are being written and the accountability is being sought, but the lessons are clear. Listen to children, believe children when they're consistent across time, build systems that recognize patterns, not just isolated incidences. Don't let unsubstantiated mean case closed. It should mean keep watching. Don't let families disappear during active investigations. Don't let investigations sit open for months without action. 12 calls from the same school should mean something. I don't feel safe at home should be a red line. And use the tools that work, like dependency proceedings, consistently and without bias. Transparency matters. We need to know how decisions were made, not just what decisions were reached. Rebekah told the truth. She did everything a child could do to save herself. We owe it to her and every child trapped after multiple investigations to build a system that actually protects them. Again, for resources on reporting child abuse, Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline, you can call them at 1-800-422-4453. I hope you guys enjoyed the content. There was a lot here. As always, guys, please subscribe, share the content. I have a buy me a cup of coffee in the link in this description, as well as on top of the YouTube channel. Thank you for forgiving me. I was sick, but I wanted to get the information out because it's very time sensitive. So I wanted to get it out to you guys. So again, forgive me. I know I was under the weather, but I wanted to push it out. And by doing that, also makes me feel better. It does, because I know the information has to get out there. We have to be aware. And there's something here that we can change. As always, guys, stay safe.